What's up, guys? Welcome to the Westworld Companion Podcast. We just finished episode 3 of season 2, entitled Virtù e Fortuna, which of course translates to Virtue and Fortune. This is the instant reaction. Again, if you want more of an in-depth plot recap, a further deep dive into the bigger theories and all that, that'll be midweek, so stay tuned for that. Actually, if you want to just subscribe right now, that would help a lot. But getting to the instant reaction, I want to start with a shout out to the opening score. Obviously, this has been sort of recurring theme throughout the series of doing these kind of, well, I mean, traditionally it's been the Western organ style of modern songs. Now this episode, of course, opened in what I assume is India. I think it was India, a different park within the Westworld universe. Obviously, we saw Samurai Park last season. This time we opened with a park that appears to take place somewhere in the jungle, at least. And we get an Indian version of Seven Nation Army. Shout out to the White Stripes. I've actually been cramming them recently because I'm going to see Jack White. He's headlining Boston Calling this year. But beside the point, I thought that was cool. Cool way to start the show. Immediately got me excited for the new episode, not that I needed help. Moving along, the greater significance of that opening scene is the first time we actually, I mean, there's the previews of the weeks ahead, and we see little flashes of it here and there. But for the most part, we haven't seen anything but Westworld, and I guess the modern China that we saw last episode, but we haven't seen any other parks in the entire series so far. This is the first time it opens. We're immediately in it, and there's a couple things. It presents actually a couple very interesting ideas. First, there's the whole romantic love affair between the two humans. They're not hosts, they're humans, and they're playing some kinky game where the only way to prove if you're a human versus a host is if we shoot you. And we've seen this before when people get shot by the host when the weapons don't work or whatever. It leaves a bruise, almost like a paintball. Like if you get hit with a paintball, you might have a little bruise where it hits you. It seems like that's what the bullets do. I don't want to dive too deep into the technology behind that, but it seems like that's the situation. Now, I'm actually confused about something. So I know all right. There's basically a core line of programming that makes it so that the host can't harm the humans, right? During this rebellion, when everything's going haywire, that programming changes so the host can now shoot the humans. We've seen this a lot over the past couple episodes. So if that's the case, it's not. It seems like the guns don't hurt humans, right? But all of a sudden they can, right? Like the guns all of a sudden work on humans. So how come when she shoots him? Unless that was, a split second before the rebellion took place, so the gun still didn't work, because it seems like if she shot him, she would actually have shot him. You know what I mean? Even though he is human, it seems like all of a sudden the guns work like regular guns, right? So that confused me a lot, to be honest. But anyway, it presents this idea. She even says, why would they spend all this effort having a robot pretend to be a human? So that kind of puts the idea in our heads is like, oh, wait, is that the case? Is there a robot pretending to be a human? We know about Bernard, but he's not really pretending. I mean, I guess he is. He's programmed to pretend, and it seems like when he's walking the beach, he is pretending to be human. It's just interesting to present that idea to kind of spell it out at the beginning of the episode. I thought that was definitely intentional, and I thought interesting. Yeah, the gun question confused me a little bit. But the other part beyond this, if you remember from the first episode, at the very end, they find this tiger. They imply, I think it's Stubbs, he implies that, that's weird because we have tigers in Park 6, but not here. And we've never seen basically any of these robots cross park borders before. Now, we actually saw this happen at the beginning of this episode. The lady's running from the tiger. She passes almost like it's like a beam, like a laser beam, almost like you have so you don't get crushed by your garage door when you're walking under your garage door. It almost looked like that. And she's walking through it, and the tiger followed her through it too. So what that tells me is normally there's these beams that it seems like there's a PA warning stopping people from going through it, but it seems like the robots, whether it be an animal or a human or whatever, normally couldn't cross these lines. This presents that all the borders are down, or at least in this park. But you would assume all the borders are down. That's part of the systems being down. So it seems like any host, once they get to the edge of the park, can now just cross through that beam and cross into other parks, which is interesting. I know we see, obviously, Maeve kind of bouncing from park to park and trying to find her daughter. So we know that this can happen already, but it seems there's no cunning sort of escape plan. It seems like any sort of robot can just do this. So that's probably bad news for the teams that are trying to rally these guys up and save the guests, because people can be anywhere, basically. We also find out that this flood, the area they end up in before, the area that the tiger washed up, whatever, that's just beyond the park of this other park, this Indian park. So Westworld, the Westworld park, it seems like that's also on the edge of Westworld. That beach is right on the edge of Westworld. So it seems like all the parks might converge. Like this, they might be surrounding this sort of valley that's flooded. What's the significance of that? I don't know. I'd actually like to go back and watch the first episode, just the scene with all the bodies floating. Were they all dressed in Western gear, or was it kind of a mix of different costumes? Like, could it be a collection of hosts from all different parks, or is it all Westworld? I honestly can't remember. I have to go back and check. Maybe I'll do that before the midweek episode. But the girl from the Indian world that escapes, she kills the tiger, she escapes, she swims to shore at the end of the episode, and she's getting captured by the Ghost Nation. So I don't know where they're going with that, but that's interesting too. I wonder, I mean, obviously they dedicated a lot of time to her in this episode and she survived, so there must be some significance to her, but I wonder, how big of a character she's going to be or what part she's going to play in all this, because right now we really don't know too much. So that's interesting in itself. But the other thing we got from that Indian scene, just to touch on this real quick, was that they're rebelling too. This is all happening. So it's not just Westworld. People are wondering, I think, whether it was contained to Westworld or whether other parks were rebelling. It seems like they all are, because he uttered the phrase, "These violent delights have violent ends." Ganju, I think his name is. Shout out to him. He's the Indian world version of Dolores. Probably not, but still. So I thought that was cool. So he was rebelling. It seems like if that's happening there and Westworld, it's probably happening everywhere. Why wouldn't it be? Especially if this is Ford's plan to kind of unleash hell on the humans. Why would he just do it in one park? Obviously, you think he'd be in all the parks, and it seems like at least the 2 parks we've seen were 2 for 2. So it seems like all of them. Seems like that's the case. But I wanted to focus on Ghost Nation heavily, actually, in this instant reaction. Obviously, once again, we will go back and do a plot recap and get into every single detail of what everything means, and do a much more elaborate deep dive midweek. But just to focus on the Ghost Nation, they're a very interesting sort of piece of all this, because there's something different about them, and we've always known this. And we're getting more clarity on what's going on. We're starting to see what they're trying to do. We still don't know their motives or why they're doing it, but just to focus on that. In this episode, we saw for the second time them not responding to commands. So last season, we had stubs that said freeze all motor functions, and they just kind of kept slowly marching towards him. We saw that, and it was weird. We were like, they programmed to rebel. Is something going on? Is there something wrong with Stubbs? And they're not recognizing his commands. We didn't know because it was an isolated incident. This time, we've seen Maeve freeze a million different robots. We saw her freeze the cannibal in episode 1. We saw her tell the other host, it was like a dying girl who was sitting down, and she said, have a deep and dreamless slumber, which is kind of a code to put him into sleep mode. She did that to somebody, so clearly she can control all these robots, right? And there's a moment where the Ghost Nation is coming towards her, and she kind of does the whole Obi-Wan Kenobi thing, where she's trying to convince these robots to follow her commands, and they just ignore her too. So for some reason, I don't know why, but for some reason, this Ghost Nation can override. They don't respond back to anybody. They're kind of on their own. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's implying that they have free will, because we know that Maeve and Dolores and anyone who's sort of conscious can't be controlled by the verbal commands either. So I don't know if that's part of that. I don't know if they've always just been some sort of fail-safe, and then there's some reason why they can't be controlled, because they need to be almost an uncontrollable group in the park to I don't know. I don't know what their motives are. But we've seen them sort of take steps towards a goal, at least. And that goal seems to be collecting humans. Now, just to recap, obviously season 1, they tackle Stubbs. We don't know what happened. We know that Stubbs is alive and okay on the beach 2 weeks later. We don't know how he got there. We don't know what happened between him getting tackled in season 1 and that beach scene. But we do know that they went after Stubbs and obviously put him back into the world, right? In this episode, we see the woman who comes over from the Indian world. We see her come over, and they're standing over her. It seems like they're trying to capture her as well, correct? So that's 2 hosts that we've seen that with. Or sorry, 2 humans that we've seen Ghost Nation try to capture for whatever reason. The third, also in this episode, was Lee. So they come upon Maeve, Hector, and Lee, and they basically say that they don't care. Hector and Maeve can go about their way. They don't care, but they want Lee. They wanted to get Lee, the one human out of the 3 of them. I don't think it's a coincidence. They basically been trying to collect all these humans, and the question is why. And now it's intentionally vague. We don't know. I'm sure we'll get more clarity on that, especially with Stubbs, because that's the one person we saw Ghost Nation successfully go after Stubbs, capture him, and he's somehow back in the real world and not really acknowledging that happened, at least not in the scenes that we've seen. Now, it seems like they got this chick from Indian world too. So I don't know what they're doing with her. Lee obviously escapes, but it's interesting. It's interesting to see their development and the development of their sort of story and how they fit into this show, because I feel like they're going to be important. They've kind of been in the background of the entire series so far, and we don't really know what their motives are, but it seems like they're important. Just a few quick follow-ups, tying up of loose ends from previous episodes. First of all, the tiger. We know where the tiger came from now. Peter Abernathy, we found him. I don't know where he is in the 2-week jump ahead. I don't know where he is in that. The beach scene, they're still looking for him. He's obviously missing. They reiterate that now. Hale's like, hey, he seems to keep slipping away. What's going on with him? Talking to Bernard. So I don't know. I don't know where he is now, but I know where he is at the point of the rebellion. He's with Dolores. So the milk bandit, who I don't even remember his name. He's got the sweet mutton chops. He has him captured. He thinks they're trying to get him to escape on the train. So Peter Abernathy is dressed as a human. He's in a business suit. He's like ready to go to leave the park so they can smuggle all the information out. We find out the information, by the way, is an encryption key. They don't know what it's a key to, but it's like an encryption key with a thin character kind of pulled over him. So that was the goal, and his whole mission was get on the train, get out of the park, which might tie in with Maeve too. We'll get to that in a second, but that just popped into my head. But that's his whole mission, right? Get on a train, get out of the park. The rebellion happens. He gets caught up in being a human hostage. They end up getting captured by the Confederados. They get brought to the fort that Dolores just took over. And now all of a sudden, Dolores is reunited with Peter Abernathy, who is, as I'm sure you remember, her father from season 1. And she still has empathy. I thought this was interesting, too. You see this a lot. Dolores has empathy for her father. Now, they know they're robots, right? They're conscious. They know they're robots. They know that they actually are not related to these people. It's just how they're programmed. They're kind of arbitrarily pieced together or whatever. But Dolores still has empathy and love and real emotion towards her father. We also know that Maeve has those same emotions towards her daughter, or it seems that, right? Like she's going, we haven't seen them together, but she's going to find her daughter. So it's weird. They know that they're not real, but yet they still feel these attachments, whether that's the result of some residual programming or whether that's supposed to have a larger significance of these robots learning empathy and learning to come together and not just be a machine. That's almost like a human emotion. It almost makes these machines more human. But anyway, Dolores has him. She also captures Bernard in the situation, and they sort of reunite. They're coming together. It seems like Dolores was kind of convincing Bernard that he also needs to break out and that as robots, they should be fighting for a better life or whatever. And he actually tries to escape, so it doesn't quite take, but Clementine bashes him in the head. He gets brought back, so she still has Bernard. Unfortunately, Charlotte Hale, and some of the security team capture Peter Abernathy, so they have him. Yet, in the present day, the 2-week jump ahead, they don't have him anymore, so somehow they lose him again. Dolores sends Confederados out, or not Confederados, but her men, the Wyatt crew, sends people out to go find him, so I don't know what happens with that. But at one point, Charlotte Hale did capture Peter Abernathy and then loses him again, allegedly, unless she's lying about losing him. A lot to unpack there. But that's where we leave off with him. I thought it was interesting that the Milk Bandit guy, we spotlighted this in the first episode. He basically shot a woman in the head. And then when we see him 2 weeks later on the beach, he's jumping in front of a bullet to stop a woman from getting shot. And we didn't understand why. Like, I don't understand how his personality changed into a complete 180. Turns out it's because Bernard actually hardwired into him and upped his levels to make him a good guy. He went from being a bad guy, and they're like, oh, we're going to turn him into a good guy with a quick, swipe of a meter. So that's what happened there. It seems like that might play into it too. Like, I didn't know you could just do that. I know you could do that, obviously, in the diagnostic center, but in this moment, with his sort of tablet thing, you can just plug into a host and change core parts of their programming and personality. That could be dangerous in the wrong hands. And finally, the biggest loose end of all, the one that was killing me. It's all I could think about when I was watching the show. Where's Felix? What's going on with Felix? He escaped. He helped Maeve escape. He survived. What happened to him? Well, we finally got our answer. He's fine. He's tied up to elevator. Luckily, that chick with the snake tattoo, Armistice, she's lighting people on fire. She reunites with Hector, Maeve, and Lee. And then they stumble upon good old Felix and his buddy, I forget his name, Sylvester? I feel like Sylvester sounds right. Stumbles upon the two of them, and they take the elevator up, and they're going into Samurai World. But it's funny. I was literally, like, genuinely happy to see Felix. When she walked around the corner and he was there, I was like, yes. I was just happy to see him. I missed him. I love that him and Maeve are friends. Also, and it seems like Maeve is protecting Lee to almost like a an empathetic state too. Like, she's not just using him as a tool. It seems like she kind of likes Lee. They're like joking around. There's a chemistry there, sort of. If she didn't care about him and didn't really need him, I know he like serves a purpose, but if she didn't really need him, the Ghost Nation wanted him, and she basically risked her life trying to save Lee's life, which is interesting. I feel like Maeve, this is why I feel like she's more of the liberator, because Dolores is like, I don't give a shit about any of these people, and Maeve is more like, no, this team is my friend. I don't mind this team, and he's cool. He can stay. Like, I feel like she's more of a fair and balanced leader or liberator or whatever you want to call it. But whether that's supposed to represent her and Dolores having the same end goal and just having two different approaches to it, kind of like a Martin Luther King, Malcolm X type dichotomy, or whatever, wherever they're going with this, it's definitely interesting to watch it play out, because there are two very different approaches to the same goal of freedom and better quality of life. And finally, just to mention it, there was some foreshadowing that Teddy might go rogue and rebel against Dolores. He already ignored a direct command of hers. She told him to go out back and basically execute the Confederados. And the Confederado is like, look at you, man, I'm looking at you, and we're both just trigger men for tyrants, which I thought was a cool line anyway. But he's basically saying, you're not making your own decisions, you're just doing whatever this tyrant Dolores wants. And he's like, that's not true. And then he lets them all go. So, first of all, smooth talking about the Confederados. Really well done. He saved his own life. Second of all, you've seen him be kind of resistant to this entire thing. He kind of questions everything Dolores is doing, and Dolores is like, no, don't worry about it, Teddy. I know what I'm doing. And Teddy's like, I don't know. And he feels like very uncomfortable with all of this. And it seems like this is all leading to him rebelling. Now, what we do know is that Teddy is dead 2 weeks later, right? We see his body in the flood. So how does it go from him being by Dolores' side to being dead in the flood? That's a great question. And I guess that's where I'll leave you for this instant reaction. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I said I was going to do it, so I will. To elaborate, and I forgot all about this. I knew they're trying to smuggle Peter Abernathy out of the park because he had the information, and I mean, they flash back to season 1, so I guess this happened. I just don't remember. So the way they get him out of the park is by dressing him like a human, popping him on a train, and having him escape, right? So I guess my question is that what they were trying to do with Maeve as well? Because remember, we don't know. In season 1, we find out that Maeve was programmed to basically get out of the park. They programmed her to do the same thing that Peter Abernathy's programmed to do, which is get on the train and leave. And all it said was somebody with high security clearance had altered her core programming. Was that the first attempt to smuggle information out of the park? And if that's the case, who did that? We still don't know. Like I said, last year, season 1, we assumed that Ford was the controlling force behind all this, but we don't know that. We know that Ford's the controlling force behind all the Dolores stuff. But with the Maeve stuff, it just said a person with high security clearance. Could that be Hale? Could that be William? Could somebody else have programmed her to escape? And if that's true, does that mean that she also has all this information in her? Does she have, or maybe not the same information, but some sort of information in her where they're trying to get her to escape, and she overrode her own programming and went back into the park? Because that would make her a pretty high-value target. They're doing all this to go after Peter Abernathy, risking their lives going into this fort, the Confederado fort, which, by the way, they knew that they would be at, because I think they assumed, listen, if these robots are rebelling, we're probably going to find them at the military base. You know, that which is just smart thinking, but they said they knew they were going to be there. But anyway, clearly Peter Abernathy is a high-value target because he has this information in him. So I wonder if Maeve is too. That's all I'm saying. We haven't seen any evidence of anyone specifically going after Maeve, but we still don't know who changed her programming in the first place. And that is something I think we should definitely focus on moving forward. But that'll wrap it up. Thank you for listening to the Westworld Companion Podcast, presented by The Disorderly. Head over to thedisorderly.com for the best in sports and entertainment. I, of course, will have my MLB weekly recap coming up. Red Sox still in first place. Barely. But this Red Sox-Yankees series is going to be crazy, so I'm looking forward to that this week. David St. Martin is posting the Spotlight on a daily basis, coming up with the best sort of hidden gems around the world of entertainment. Lots of good stuff. So head there. Go to The Disorderly Media on Twitter. If you search for The Disorderly ENT, you can find us on Facebook as well. Give us a like there. And then, of course, rate, review, subscribe to this podcast. Tell a friend about this podcast. Watch it on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher. Whatever's convenient for you. I don't care. I just want you guys to listen to it. So whatever's convenient, and wherever you are watching it, please leave a comment. Give us a thumbs up. Write us a 5-star review. It means a lot. Trust me. And that's it. Time for bed, guys. These are tiring, by the way, because I have to do these at 9:00, and then right afterwards I got to record the podcast and then edit and put it up. And I do have a job, believe it or not. Disorder is not paying the bills yet. So yeah, bedtime for your friend Nick Risner. Find me on Twitter at Nick Risner. DMs are open. Ask me any questions about Westworld or whatever. Constructive feedback, anything you got, I'd appreciate it. All right, that's it. I'm out of here, guys. Peace.